The White House is monitoring a hostage situation at a synagogue in Colleyville, Texas. That's about 40 minutes outside of Dallas. Authorities say the FBI and the Texas Department of Public Safety are at the Congregation Beth Israel right now. Marky Martin is on the scene for us, and she begins our coverage tonight. Marky, is there any report of injuries or any action happening right now within the last few minutes? And Marky, you've been a reporter there on the ground for quite a while. You know that community well. Tell us about this community of Colleyville.
Yeah, so Colleyville, as you mentioned right off the top, it's just north of Dallas. This is a community I've gone back and forth to my whole life. We have good family friends here. This is a small town suburb of Dallas.
Have you been in touch with anyone who knows people inside, any relatives of people who attend that synagogue?
I have not been in touch with anybody who knows relatives inside. I have been in touch with a former FBI agent.
And this is a massive law enforcement presence. The response has been huge. There is a law enforcement presence at every synagogue in the Dallas area right now as a precaution. We see the lights behind you, but paint a picture for us what it looks like right now on the scene.
Yeah, so Rudabeh, our crew has been here for a few hours, and it is just flooded with media. It's flooded with law enforcement. It's Colleyville PD.
And the hostage taker even mentioned that was recorded on a live stream. He thanked the rabbi for keeping the door open and allowing him in. He said he liked the rabbi. So that speaks to the welcoming environment that the synagogue has.
Yeah, it really does. And we know that this is a welcoming community, not only Colleyville, but this synagogue.
Marky, we will check back in with you shortly. Thank you so much for that reporting. And we want to bring in now Rabbi Denise Eager. She is joining us live tonight, and she is friends with Rabbi Charlie Citron Walker, who is inside. He is the rabbi of that synagogue. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I know this must be a terrifying time for you. What can you tell us?
Thank you so much for having us. The whole Jewish community is just standing with bated breath and deep prayers for our colleague and our friend, Rabbi Charlie Citron Walker, and the other hostages.
And we see a picture of him here, a smile that lights up a room, just a magnetic smile.
He does.
And this is an attack on the Jewish community. I mean, can you speak to that as a rabbi and as a leader of the Jewish community? And sadly, also, if you could speak to the preparations that synagogues unfortunately have to make for active shooter situations.
Yes, people might not understand this, but there has been an increasing rise of anti-Semitism in our own country. For years, we would go to visit Europe, and you'd visit a synagogue in Europe. You'd walk through magnetometers with security guards. Over the last number of years, particularly the last 5 years in the United States, we've all had to increase our security preparations.
You are a leader of your community, of your faith. How do you reassure your congregants at a time that must be very emotional and so scary for you?
It is. As a past president of the Central Conference of American Rabbis, which is the same organization that Rabbi Citron Walker is a member of, all of the Reform rabbis worldwide, we all have had to take time to reach out to our communities.
That is a really beautiful message, acts of charity in their names. Can you tell us anything about this particular synagogue, about his congregants, about his community that he was leading? We know it was a small group of people, as you mentioned.
Yes, this congregation is in a northern suburb of the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and it is a congregation that's about 150 households.
Does it give you any hope that knowing his personality and knowing his faith and maybe his calming presence, that he is with those congregants and that he might have some sort of de-escalating power with his own hostage taker? We heard on that live stream, we're not playing it obviously, but I did listen to it earlier, and I heard the hostage taker actually thank him for having his door open. And he actually said, "I like you, Rabbi, but any police officers," he threatened any police officers who might come in to try to stop his hostage taking operation. But he did acknowledge the rabbi's kindness.
Right, and this is certainly our great hope that Rabbi Citron Walker is such a welcoming presence that he will be able to help the assailant keep calmer.
And yet all these years later, despite all of that survival, despite everything the Jewish community has gone through, all of the shameful historical events that have happened, and yet all these years later, here we are.
Here we are. The Jewish people still lives. Am Yisrael Chai is what we say in Hebrew. The Jewish people still lives. And we continue to thrive and to really emphasize within our Jewish tradition that the world can be made better.
I want to talk to you about, revisit a little bit the security preparations that all synagogues have to make in this day and age in the United States. What does that look like? Is it like school drills that children have to go through to prepare for possible school shootings?
Yes, it is exactly that.
And I understand Rabbi Citron Walker has a wife and 2 children.
Yes.
Do you think that they're with him?
We don't know that. We don't believe that they're with them in the synagogue at this moment.
Well, Rabbi Eger, thank you so much for joining us tonight. I'm so sorry for everything you're going through. Our thoughts are with you, and we wish you the very best. We appreciate your time tonight.
Thank you.
And we continue the breaking news on the synagogue outside of Dallas and the hostage situation there. Former FBI agent Jennifer Koffendorfer is live with us tonight. Thank you so much for being here.
Hi, Ruta Bay.
So what can you tell us? We know we have some tidbits that we gleaned from that live stream about what the suspect was saying, about some of his demands. Tell us a little bit about what you've gathered from what you know so far.
Well, this seems to be a definite terrorism type situation. And so the FBI is probably going to assume the case and assume responsibility.
And you talk about quid pro quo, and it sounds like, I can't be in the mind of this hostage taker, obviously, but it sounds like that might have been the motivation for this, because he's been talking about Aifa Siddiqui, who, of course, is a terrorist who is in a facility, a federal lockup in Texas. She was charged with 7 charges, including attempted murder and armed assault on officers in Afghanistan in 2010. And he called her his sister. We have no reason to believe that they are biologically related, but he called for her release. Do you think this is a quid pro quo situation? Also, given that Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State have called for her release and they've offered prisoner swaps for her release in the past.
Well, it definitely sounds, from my understanding, this is what he's asking for. This is not going to be what he gets.
Obviously, we don't know what he's saying to the hostage negotiator, but how do you get inside the mind of someone like that to try to figure out what the next step is?
Well, we've talked about on scene what's happening, but I need to mention at this time, segueing into your question, is what's happening behind the scenes.
Let me tell you about some of the things that were mentioned on that live stream. You tell me what you make of it as a professional in law enforcement. He said that he had a bag of weapons that he had been carrying around with him for 16 hours. We don't know if that's true or not. He made multiple references to his own mortality. He talked about how he had 6 children of his own, and he asked the congregants if they had any children and how many children they had. He expressed anger at England. And then, of course, he mentioned Siddiqui, who he called his sister. What do you make of all of that? He also said that he liked the rabbi and he thanked the rabbi for keeping the door open for him.
Well, I think I would hold everything he said as being truthful. You have to err on the side of that.
And Jennifer, I just want to break in here. We do have confirmation from the Colleyville PD that one hostage has been released. A male who was uninjured, my producer is telling me in my ear, a male uninjured who has been released. What do you make of that?
That is terrific. To me, that tells me that this hostage negotiator that's talking back and forth with him is making some headway.
Does this signal to you that more hostages are on their way out?
I would say this signals to me that it's possible that as time goes on, he will release more.
It was very hard to understand that Facebook live stream, but it sounded like he also said there were bombs in undisclosed locations. We also have that from law enforcement sources, that was one of his threats, that he was carrying around a bag full of weapons for 16 hours and that he had bombs in undisclosed locations. What do you do with that as an investigator?
Well, the bomb techs, and there are bomb techs that are assigned to the Dallas field office. Those bomb techs are definitely going to be trying to discern from the information that hopefully is going to be gotten pursuant to a search warrant at his residence and of his car, whether this is possible or not.
And how do you walk the balance between sending in a robot, for example, or sending in a police officer without escalating the situation? So far, we don't know of any injuries. We know that this hostage who was released is uninjured. That is great news. But how do you prevent the situation from becoming more inflamed while at the same time, conducting an operation to rescue the people inside?
Well, that hostage negotiator's chief concern is going to be keeping that congregation, however many people are there, under control.
Jennifer, thank you so much. You have so much wisdom. We really appreciate you sharing that with us. Stand by for us. We'll come back to you in a moment. But we want to check in now with Markey Martin. She is on the ground following that breaking news. We know the White House is monitoring the situation. And Markey, amazing, wonderful news that one hostage has been released uninjured.
Yeah, just like Jennifer said, Rudabeh, it's absolutely fantastic news to know that a hostage has left.
And we heard your interview with one of the members of the community and a member of the Jewish community who had gathered outside. What was their reaction when they found out that the hostage had been released?
He was sad. He was really sad, Rudabeh. I talked to him for about 10 minutes, and interesting, he is the chairman of the group who oversees the physical security of Jewish communities and physical locations.
And hopefully that live stream actually does help the situation by providing clues to law enforcement so they know how to navigate the situation better. Of course, we have no reason to believe that the sister he is speaking about is actually his biological sister. Markey, thank you so much for that report on the ground. We will check back in with you shortly. We're going to go to break and we'll be right back. Former FBI agent and hostage negotiator Phil Andrew joining us live tonight. Thanks so much for being here, Phil.
Rudabeh.
So take us inside the mind of the hostage negotiator right now, what they're focused on, what the goal is in terms of communication with the suspect and breaking through with that hostage taker.
Right now, they are methodically building rapport. They are listening. They are addressing any of the emotion that the hostage taker may be exhibiting.
That was my first thought, too, when we heard a little bit about him from one of his personal friends, that maybe he does have the ability to de-escalate the situation, especially given that the suspect on the live stream actually acknowledged him and said that he liked the rabbi and thank you for letting me in.
By all available reports, this is a very special person that's leading this community.
And we just saw a picture of that Rabbi Citron Walker. We've heard so many wonderful things about him. But what if he was the one who was released? Then what?
Well, that doesn't seem to be the reporting. And I would be very surprised at that, given the type of person that he's been described to be. This is somebody who's leading a flock. I don't think that he would be willing to leave if others weren't released.
Well, we did hear reports that there was a need for medical attention. So you bring up the same point. What do you make of the suspect basically acknowledging his mortality and saying he expected to die today, that he has 6 children, but he expects to die? What does that signal to you?
Well, that this is a planned event, that he did this very purposefully to accomplish something.
All right, Phil, stay with us. We're going to check back in with you in just a minute. I have so many more questions for you. We have to go to a break, and we'll be right back. President Biden has been briefed on the situation. Multiple agencies, including the FBI and SWAT, are currently monitoring all developments there. And as we reported just a moment ago, good news, one person has been released uninjured, according to police on the ground there. And we want to get right out to News Nation's Markey Martin, who joins us live from the scene tonight. Markey. And so many cities across the country reacting. The scale of this, everyone is on alert tonight, and synagogues around Dallas and as far as New York on high alert tonight. We have a tweet in from Mayor Eric Adams from New York saying, "We are closely monitoring the hostage situation in Colleyville, Texas, praying for a peaceful and safe conclusion. Out of an abundance of caution, the NYPD has deployed additional resources to key Jewish locations in the city tonight." Is that sense of gravity being felt where you are on the ground?
Rudabeh, you can certainly feel it here. Cities nationwide are responding to this. Israel, I mean, this is a global response.
And I know you've been interacting with those people on the ground who have gathered there. They're concerned, they're scared. What was the reaction when they found out that one of the hostages had indeed been released, uninjured?
Yeah, we're just hearing a lot of relief.
Phil Andrew mentioned that without even knowing about that is one of the reasons hostages typically are released, is that maybe there's a medical issue involved. And we know that the nearby neighborhood has been evacuated as well. We heard from Jennifer Coffendorfer about the massive scale of the operation that is involved, robots, all kinds of law enforcement agencies on the ground, mapping out the actual structure where the synagogue is, mapping out the building. And so I imagine that it's just crawling with law enforcement.
Yeah, it is crawling with law enforcement. You're exactly right. Streets have been blocked off.
And there is some sort of an irony in this that COVID might actually save some of these people, because that's the reason the service was being live streamed, which then gave clues and information to law enforcement. And also maybe there weren't as many people gathered at that time because of COVID protocol.
You're exactly right, Rudabeh. It's a fantastic point. What we're hearing is that there are about 3 to 4 people inside.
Marquis, thank you for the update. Of course, we'll check back in with you live on the ground outside the synagogue, and we'll be back after this break. We want to bring back in now Rabbi Denise Egger. She is joining us live tonight. Thank you so much for staying with us. We know that you are friends with Rabbi Charlie Citrin Walker, and I first want to get your reaction on the breaking news, this good news that one of the hostages has been released uninjured.
Well, we give thanks to God for the ability of this hostage to go free.
So many people have these hostages in their hearts tonight, just wishing the best, praying for them. I want to get your response as a rabbi yourself, and this massive response at Jewish institutions, synagogues, federations around the country and world. It must be a little bit scary for you all right now.
It is. It's very scary, and I'd like to say this is an isolated incident in that sense of being on a high alert, but this has sadly become a regular occurrence in the Jewish community across the United States.
And knowing what you know about your friend, and based on everything you've told us about him, about his calming and welcoming presence, about his leadership, not only within his faith, but within his community. We saw his smiling face, that picture of him. He has a calming presence even in his image. What do you think? And we also spoke to counterterrorism experts and hostage negotiators within this newscast who said that he might be playing, a very large role in negotiating within the room with the hostage taker and maybe bringing down the temperature inside that room.
Well, we certainly hope so. Rabbi Citrin Walker is that kind of person.
And the hostage taker himself even mentioning that quality about his own hostage on that live stream, saying thank you for opening the door for me, and expressing that he actually liked the rabbi. For those who are not familiar with the reform movement within Judaism, tell us a little bit about that, because I think it's relevant here in terms of welcoming others of all faiths, as you just mentioned, in the door.
Yes, Reform Judaism, born in the early 1800s in Germany and planted here in America in the early 1840s. It is the dominant denomination of Judaism in North America.
And you have been such a wealth of knowledge as a rabbi and as a leader of faith and as a community leader, but I want to speak to you as his friend and the range of emotions that you must be going through tonight within these 8 or so hours. It's been very suspenseful. We've had bad news. We've had good news. Luckily, we just had this great development about someone being released uninjured. But what has it been like for you on a personal level as his friend?
I'm heartsick, and I've been very worried. Our rabbis, our colleagues across the country have been connecting with one another, and we've been praying for him.
We want to bring in now former FBI agent and hostage negotiator Phil Andrew, live joining us again for more on this breaking news situation, the hostage situation that is ongoing all day and all night now. Phil, thank you for joining us. I want to talk to you about the motivations of this hostage taker based on what we know. He brought up this convicted terrorist who's being held at a federal detention facility in Texas, likely for the rest of her life. He called her his sister. We now know, based on the confirmation from her lawyer, that this is not her actual brother, and that she has ties to Al-Qaeda, and that Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State have both demanded her release and requested prisoner exchange regarding her before. So what do you make of all of that?
Well, clearly there's a connection here. Whether he's created this connection in his mind, that he has some nexus to her, or he's followed the case, that likely negotiators and the folks in the room already know.
And she is convicted of violent crimes, including attempting to kill Americans. During that shooting, she exclaimed her intent and her desire to kill Americans. And so given that he also was talking about England and condemning England, what do you make of that? Does that make him more dangerous to you, given that he appears to idolize or be calling for the freedom of this convicted terrorist whose intention was to kill Americans?
Well, whatever it was on the outset, that his motivation, now he's met the reality of it.
Walk us through some of the conversation you would be having with him if you were the person on the phone trying to get these hostages released.
Initially, I would let them drive the conversation and only reacting to emotion. You sound upset. I can tell you're frustrated. And the same active listening skills that we would use with a toddler.
So it sounds basically like therapy, letting him express his grievances, being empathetic, pretending that you're kind of on his side, you're listening to him. Would you be making promises in this situation, even if they're empty promises, in order to get the hostages released? For example, I understand where you're coming from. Yes, we'll work on getting this prisoner released.
I would not. I think that when you're building that delicate relationship with somebody very early on in a crisis like this, that I would never advise of any tricks, any gamemanship.
I mean, it makes sense that you're addressing their angst. There was some sort of angst, right, that drove these people to commit these heinous crimes. And so maybe no one has ever listened to them before until a hostage negotiator.
Sadly, I've been at the back end of these where somebody is released and they are grateful and thankful that they were given this opportunity. Now they're still going to face the music for what they've done, but they feel like they have finally been heard.
So are you drawing on their emotions? For example, we know he at least says that he has 6 children. Are you painting that picture in his mind, reminding him about his loved ones, reminding him about the consequences?
You are. As you're able to build rapport, you are going to use everything that they've shared with you. And remember, too, that what they've shared with you doesn't necessarily have to be true. It just has to be what they believe.
How do you penetrate that level of determination? I mean, we see suicide bombings all the time where people are so committed to their cause that they're willing to give their life up for it. And that seems like something that would be a huge challenge for a hostage negotiator.
Well, the real opportunity comes when we have the opportunity for dialogue.
And you had mentioned earlier that one of the reasons hostages are often released is because they need medical attention. Marky Martin, who is reporting for us on the ground, confirmed that there was someone who was having a tightness in the chest. Does that mean that this person has some level of empathy, that maybe he didn't intend to actually kill or hurt anyone, and when he found out that there was a danger that someone was having a medical episode, perhaps, that he let them go? Is that a good sign?
I think that it is a good sign. And I think, look, I'm not in the mind of this hostage taker, but I suspect that the reality of the people that he found, even though he went there potentially in his mind to cause harm, to create fear, I think what he found are people that are surprising him.
I think it's pretty safe to say, based on his statements and this act of violence, that this is an act of terrorism. Does it mean anything, though, that he is holding hostages in the first place, as opposed to going in and just committing violence without any warning and taking people's lives and hurting them? At least these people are still alive, and one person has been released. Is that something you're kind of talking about in your mind when you say that there have been a lot of good developments?
I think any time that there is an opportunity for intervention is great, not just for law enforcement, but for the community, and certainly those that are most affected by this.
And we know, as far as the danger factor, he said that he's been carrying around a bag of weapons for 16 hours. That was some hours ago. I've lost track of the time at this point. And that he had bombs in undisclosed locations. What do you do with that information?
Well, you've got to follow up on it. Like, and nothing I'm saying, even though, the negotiators are there to build a connection, be in dialogue, get them focused on them as opposed to the plans that he went there to carry out. Nothing I'm saying should make folks think that this isn't a very, very dangerous situation.
All right, Phil, Andrew, incredible insight as always. Thank you for taking us inside the mind and the methods of the hostage negotiators who are working so hard right now. We appreciate it. We're going to take a break and we'll be right back. Welcome back. We want to reset the scene for you on this breaking news we've been covering all night out of Colleyville, Texas. The man that has taken at least 4 people hostage inside a synagogue has released one person uninjured. 3 people now remain inside. This is at the Congregation Beth Israel. It's located right outside of Dallas. There is a heavy police presence, all sorts of law enforcement from Colleyville PD to SWAT to the FBI. They are all on the scene as this hostage situation stretches on into the night. They are in contact with that hostage taker. We do have a statement from the Houston chapter of the Council on American Islamic Relations. They are now speaking out about this current situation in Texas. The board chair, John Floyd, who also represents Aifa Siddiqui. She is that alleged member of the terrorist organization who the hostage taker has been calling for her release. Here is the statement from her lawyer and on behalf of the organization CARE. Part of the statement reads, in part, quote, "We stand in solidarity with the Jewish community, and we pray that law enforcement authorities are able to swiftly free the hostages and bring them to safety. We want to make it known that the hostage taker is not Dr. Aifa Siddiqui's brother, who is not even in the same region where this horrible incident is taking place. We want the hostage taker to know that Dr. Aifa Siddiqui and her family strongly condemn this act and do not stand by you." And our Marky Martin has been on the scene for hours now. She is working to gather the latest information. Let's check now back in with her, Marky, and the big development tonight within the last few hours. I don't know, I've lost track, is that one hostage has been released uninjured. We're even seeing some movement behind you. I don't know if that means anything. Some law enforcement vehicles were driving through the shot there behind you. We know that neighborhood has been evacuated, and so many people across the country, across the world, across the spectrum of the Jewish faith around the world are waiting with bated breath to see what happens here tonight. Do we have any indication if there will be a press conference soon or anything of that nature? We know that law enforcement has been releasing Twitter statements and some press releases. I know they're kind of in a bind here because they're dealing with this situation as it unfolds as well. But do we know if we'll get an update from them at any point? And you have to wonder, why did he choose this community? You mentioned it's a small town, it's a small community. We know that the prisoner whose release he is demanding is incarcerated in Texas, but not there. So many people looking for answers, and most of all, I'm sure, the people inside enduring this nightmare. Marky, thank you. We're going to take a break, and we'll be back on the other side.